The bombings, the misery of daily life in Iraq mask a deepening humanitarian crisis in the country. The homeless and the helpless are suffering beyond imagination, says Oxfam. Why? And who's responsible? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm David Foster. Oxfam issued a report from Jordan on Monday highlighting the humanitarian crisis in Iraq. It says warnings have been ignored and the reality for millions is a life of misery that none could have imagined 5 years ago. Anna Vergi has more.
The coalition that invaded Iraq promised life after Saddam would be much better, but for the majority of Iraqis, it has become far worse. A report written by Oxfam and a coalition of Iraqi NGOs shows just how bad the situation is. More than a third of Iraqis need immediate emergency aid, and over 4 million cannot afford to buy food. Almost half the population lives in absolute poverty. Children have suffered the most, with over a quarter of Iraqi children malnourished. And it's not just food the Iraqis need. 70% of the population lacks access to adequate water supplies, and 80% effective sanitation. Oxfam says the ongoing violence in Iraq has overshadowed a humanitarian situation that has only grown since the U.S.-led invasion in 2003. And the report holds the Iraqi government accountable for many of the problems. Baghdad has to improve emergency support, it says, and should give more power to local authorities to administer assistance. Oxfam also calls on the United Nations and international donors to deliver more humanitarian aid. But daily violence in the country reduces the ability of aid organizations to work, and until Iraq is more secure, it seems the Iraqi people will continue to suffer.
Joining us now, our guest in London, Adam Leach, the lead regional director for the Middle East programme at Oxfam. And in Amman in Jordan, Makki Nazal, chief consultant of the Iraqi human rights group Al-Raya. He's also the regional coordinator for the US-based No More Victims NGO. Adam Leach, let me come to you in London first of all. It is an Oxfam report, and you lay the blame largely at the door of sanctions and war. Now, sanctions were brought in many years ago. The war began 4 years ago. When did this really start to bite?
Well, over the last 10 years, as you say, life has got considerably harder for Iraqis. And in 2003, lack of access to water for 50% of Iraqis was bad. So the situation was already bad when there was an attack on the country by the coalition forces. And we warned at that time that the situation was only likely to get worse. And we cautioned against a war because of the lack of planning for this situation. So it's been a long time coming, and this situation now simply cannot be ignored.
I was looking at your report and wondering why, with the worsening situation, the amount of humanitarian aid financially going into the country is actually decreasing.
The amount of money set aside for the reconstruction and development effort is astonishing. It's a huge amount of money, and it's clear that not enough attention has been given to the humanitarian crisis.
But why is the amount of humanitarian aid financially actually decreasing?
Well, as we understand it, there was a belief that Iraq could recover, and that there was a hope that the situation in Iraq would stabilize and that it would be possible to put a potentially wealthy country back on its feet. But with $26 billion of unspent oil revenues held by the government, we don't see that happening. And so we think that there is a need for proper attention to the humanitarian situation.
Makki Nazal, in Jordan, you're involved with a number of NGOs. You also work as a journalist reporting on the situation there. What I'm wondering is whether the aid is decreasing, because a lot of NGOs working in Iraq are afraid now to accept money because it might be tainted, because it comes from people associated with the occupying forces.
Yes, in fact it's worse than decreasing. It's in most areas it's not there. I mean, if you send a truck of food to a city like mine, to Fallujah, with 500,000 people, most of them really poor, then what would that truck of food do? Whom will you give that truck of food to? The situation is worsening. You know, we must talk about the other factors like security and like the actual punishments, collective punishments that are taking place. Like in Fallujah, there was a ban on car movement in the city for more than 2 months now. And even if you want to send something there, how are you going to transfer it? People are not working. People are really being starved to death. There is no work to do. There is unemployment that the world knows about. And so it's not really just decreasing. It's closing to zero, actually. And it's not, the blame is not on the NGOs. It's on the authorities. Authorities, in our language, would mean the NFI and the US administration, plus the Iraqi government. They must provide decent circumstances for people, organizations, everybody to work, to help.
Well, this is all about the security situation, making it safe for people to go out and give any help that they can. I'd like to cover that in more detail a little bit later on. But Mr. Nazzal, just give us an idea, if you can, about how difficult it is for anybody working on the ground. You talk about the problems in Fallujah. Give us some kind of concrete examples about getting food out or medical aid.
Well, let me tell you that a jar of propane gas is almost $23 worth now, and it's not more than 20% full. So you pay $23, and you get a jar that's enough for less than a week. You get a kilo of tomatoes for more than $1. And so on. And on the other hand, you are not getting any money. You cannot work. There are no cars and the city is big. You cannot go to work. And that's one example of the new system in Iraq. It's not only Fallujah, by the way. Haditha, Heat, Samara always suffer the same, Dulu'iyah. In many cities, cars are banned from movement in the street. So this is the new thing. This is the final thing that we have reached there. And people cannot work, and people who want to send anything cannot send it. Actually, we managed to send a few things like medicines, lightweight things from No More Victims and some others. But it is not a decent way of working. I mean, we are not thieves smuggling drugs or people looting a bank or something. We are humanitarian aid workers, and we need those two main parties, the Americans and the Iraqi government, to clear the way for us to work. It was much better to work in 2005 when it was said to be within brackets under the control of terrorists.
Can I bring in Adam Leach from Oxfam here? We'll come back to Jordan in just a moment. Our viewers will have seen some of the words at the bottom of the screen, one of which said 50% of Iraqi doctors have now left the country. But it's not just them, it's civil engineers, it's anybody who can get the infrastructure to working as well. This is the difficulty as well, is it not? Is that those who've left Iraq are in many ways those that are most needed now.
Sure, this is a terrible consequence of the circumstances. However, there is something like 11,000 social organizations, local NGOs, of whom only 3,000, some 2,775 or so we estimate, who are officially recognized by the government. And the government is not making it easy. I completely agree with the other contributor here that the government has got to clear the way to make it possible for NGOs to work there. There are people who are willing to work and able to work, and they need assistance.
Clear something up for me, Mr. Leach, if you would. I mean, I detected what I thought might be a criticism of other NGOs in your report in saying that they could, in fact, do more. This when Oxfam itself has already decided that it's too unsafe to be in Iraq and is working from Jordan. Was that the case?
No, we're not criticising what other NGOs are doing. We think that this is an extremely complex and a very dangerous situation for humanitarian workers of all sorts, regardless of nationality. And we're certainly not criticising what other people are honestly trying to do and doing very well in many cases and with very real effort. Our concern is that people who are properly competent to work in that situation are able to do so and that they get proper support and recognition. And we believe that the Iraqi government can make the legislative arrangements to recognise NGOs much more effective and swifter, as we believe that international donors can also relax the stringent conditions on the conventional ways of spending money, so that more effective work can be done in that situation.
Okay, bear with me both of you if you would for just a minute, because I'm going to run through some of the things that Oxfam is suggesting. The responsibility, it says, as we've been hearing, falls to the Iraqi government and to what Oxfam calls governments with capacity and influence in the country. That's other countries as well. Oxfam's calling for greater cooperation between the US, UK and Iraqi governments in efforts to cope with the crisis. The US, the UK and the international community should also recognise, it says, a responsibility to provide urgent aid to Iraqi refugees, both within Iraq and across the region. That's because more than 2 million Iraqis are now classified as internally displaced people, IDPs. And they say, and according to Oxfam, they should be properly registered and administered. At the moment, only 60% have access to the system. Oxfam's also claiming that not enough assistance being delivered where it could be. It calls on Iraq's government to increase handouts for widowed families. I'll go into that in a bit more detail in just a moment. And to extend them to other vulnerable sections of the population. And Oxfam's appealing to the armed Iraqi groups who it says have a legal obligation not to harm civilians or infrastructure. Let's go to Jordan now. Makki Nazzal is there for us, working for 2 NGOs, also a journalist. We mentioned widows there. Now, I read that they receive pensions or handouts of around about $100 a month. You talk about the cost of basic necessities in Iraq. Now, this $100 a month is roughly half the national average wage. It would seem they can hardly survive on that.
Yes, but the average wage is not good in the first place. I mean, under such circumstances in Iraq, $200 is not a big deal to talk about. I appreciate the Oxfam report, and they have their standards to talk about. But I speak, you know, according to the facts on the ground. The facts on the ground is that $200 is not enough for gasoline for your generator, for the very small generator that could not start an air conditioner. It could only start a fan. So $200 will not be a good money either. And now they are paying, not all the widows, by the way, but many widows are receiving $100. Even government officials are suffering now with $200 and $170 and even $300. If you pay a civil worker $300, then you should provide him with basic needs at reasonable prices. So this study is really good, and I thank Oxfam and NCCI for it. But it needs to look further and deeper inside the harmed cities. Like Basra, in Basra you get the propane gas for $3, while it's $23 in Baghdad and other areas like the western, especially the western areas. You cannot get medicines from hospitals. So to talk about average assistance, we should also talk, to be fair, about average salaries and to increase them as well.
You can't see the pictures, I'm afraid, but at the moment we're showing shots of doctors and mothers and children. It's worth pointing out that 90% of those who've died are men, and that leaves so many single mothers and young children. I was staggered to read about the malnutrition, gone up by 10%. Almost 1 in 3 Iraqi children now malnourished. That's since the US-led invasion. Mr. Nazzal, how critical is it for that aid to reach the children first?
Actually, it is critical. It is very critical. But you see, these statistics are not really there. I mean, many families are too shy to go and ask for food in some areas in Iraq. They do not want to say that their children suffer malnutrition. So it's a question of, you know, how many. I believe, with all my respect to Oxfam report, it's really good. But I believe that more than 20 million Iraqis are suffering what's on the Oxfam report, because what would they do? I mean, salaries are not enough for those who work for the government. Others have no work. Iraq is totally unemployed now.
So Adam Leach,
you'll either have...
Excuse me, I'm sorry about that. Sorry about the interruption. Adam Leach in London, the suggestion is that you're actually underestimating an even worse situation. Do you accept that?
It's quite possible. I mean, we've tried to put together an assembly of data such as it exists from official sources, and it may well be an understatement. And I think that the point is fair. This is a situation in which an economy that was prosperous and was stable, and that's in no way condoning the abuses of the Saddam Hussein regime. But the fact is that this was an economy that was much better off than it is now, and it's quite possible that the depth of suffering is very much more extensive.
Can you give me an idea, in your experience, of any other regional conflict that has led to such suffering by civilians within the last, let's say, 50 years?
I think it's difficult to draw comparisons. First of all, between.
Well, I mean, have we seen anything like this since the Second World War?
This situation is very, very worrying, because this is a major destabilization. It's first of all a major undermining of an economy, but it's also a major destabilization within the region. And the real concern is that it's not just about Iraq, but other countries in the region too, which are paying the price of the people leaving from Iraq, as well as the loss of a prosperous economy in the region.
And we must not forget that under international treaties, and I'll quote this one, providing shelter for Iraqi refugees is an international obligation binding under a 1951 convention. Are there countries that aren't doing enough to help?
Well, we think that Jordan and Syria, which face the largest influxes of refugees, must fulfil their obligations. But we also think that other countries, including the US and the UK, should shoulder their responsibility, and other countries too, for permitting people who seek refuge to get asylum and to get the rights that they're entitled to.
Are they not at the moment? Are they not fulfilling these obligations?
Well, we're concerned about the long-term consequences of this movement of people, and it's really important that all countries take responsibility and don't just expect countries in the region to shoulder this one, since this is a situation of multilateral responsibility.
Makki Nazzal, the Oxfam report says the political will must be found. It's a phrase we hear almost every week when it comes to either the Americans telling the Iraqi government that they have to do better, or people within Iraq saying that other areas of the country, must do their bit as well. The political will must be found to sort this out. It's becoming something, it's almost repetitious, isn't it, to the point where nobody's really listening anymore.
Who's not listening, if you allow me? I mean, it's the Americans who are not listening, and their allies who are not listening. I met some American senior officers and staff back in 2004, and I told them all this. I mean, it's not only me. Iraqis knew the situation. We knew that this is going to be endless with the American policy in Iraq. I'm not here to criticize, but there is, anyway, time to save what's left of us. They should talk to the right people. They should employ the right people. They should restart something. I mean, they are founding things that don't work, that never worked. Ministries And we have two ministers now, one in the United States who is accused of being a death squad leader, and he was a minister of something very critical, and the other is accused by the Iraqi government nowadays by being a terrorist and assassinating some people.
So does more power need to be given to people on the ground, those that really know the serious nature of the situation, rather than those within isolated government ministries?
What I mean actually is that we know who the good people are. Americans know who the good people are, but the good people do not accept the occupation. And so Americans do not accept them as ministers and government and everything. There are some very good Shia people and some very good Sunni people and some very good Kurds, but the Americans are exiling them one way or another. If not the American, then other parties, you know, by threatening them, by accusing them of things. And then the country, this is going to be an endless story. I am fed up of people asking me in the street every day, when is all this going to end? Because I know where the key is. It is kept in a safe somewhere, and they do not want to open the door for a good end for the Iraqi tragedy.
Oh, okay, tell us, where is the key? What needs to be done? If it is as simple as that.
I know. The problem was international. I'm not only blaming the United States. The whole world, when I say the whole world, I mean it. The whole world was in the sanctions my friend Adam was talking about. And the whole world was behind the United States invading Iraq. If not behind the United States, then only saying shy words to avoid a conflict with the United States. People are looking for their own interests, for their country's interests. They are not thinking of us as Iraqis. What we need is an international standing point to tell the occupation powers to sit down and talk about the real solutions. Believe me, the Iraqi problem is still easy to solve. I frankly say the key is in the hands of President Bush himself. He can simply bring in some good players to do some good things in Iraq. He should not use us as shields to say, we are not human beings now. We are just used to be for the world to be told, look what Al-Qaeda has done in Iraq.
Adam Leach.
Well, Al-Qaeda has done.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Nazzal, but we are running out of time a little bit. Adam Leach, I saw you shaking your head in agreement there. What's Oxfam's view of what might happen if this situation isn't addressed, and addressed very quickly?
Well, we think that the underlying humanitarian crisis has got to be, that we've been discussing, has got to be tackled. We're not naive. We know that there is a major conflict going on here, and I agree that all actors have got to sit down. I agree too with you that this phrase, political will must be found, is an easy phrase to say, but the truth is that there are too many people denying their responsibilities in this situation and looking to somebody else to solve it. But the truth is that there are institutions with power, and all actors in this situation have responsibilities under norms that have been established for years, and these must be respected. And fundamentally, the rights of civilians must be protected, unless we're going to descend into some kind of complete chaos. And that's what threatens in Iraq now.
Gentlemen,
by tackling the humanitarian crisis, stability can be brought to this situation, which offers some hope for an end to the violence.
Okay.
And the other side must also be dealt with.
Thank you very much indeed. Certainly the gravest humanitarian crisis in the region, perhaps in the world today. Thanks for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We welcome your comments and suggestions.